Imagine walking to a place where you worship every week, with a community that you've helped to build, and being told, suddenly, that you no longer belong where you've always sat. It's the late 1780s in Philadelphia. Black and white congregants worship together until one Sunday, Black parishioners are told to move upstairs and out of sight. During prayer, Absalom Jones and Richard Allen refuse to move and are publicly forced from their seats. That moment sparks the creation of the first independent Black church in the United States and a movement rooted in dignity, self-determination, and freedom. Welcome to the 52 Weeks of First podcast, brought to you by Philadelphia's Historic District and Visit Philly. I'm Marisa Magnatta from WMMR's Preston and Steve Show. Today, we're talking about the first African Methodist Episcopal congregation. Joining me is Elizabeth Wellington, a columnist for the Philadelphia Inquirer and one of the city's sharpest voices on race, culture, identity, and wellness. Through her weekly columns, she's been actively chronicling and analyzing Philly's historic firsts. She's here to help us unpack why this movement still matters, not just historically, but emotionally, culturally, and right now. Thank you for joining us, Elizabeth. How are you today?
Hi, Marisa. How are you?
Fabulous. I have been enjoying your columns throughout this whole year so far. Thank you so much for highlighting the 52 Weeks of Firsts.
It's been very fun. I've learned a lot, and I've seen lots of lithographs.
Oh, well, we're going to have to talk offline about that because that's super exciting. But today you're joining us to talk about the first African Methodist Episcopal Church here in Philadelphia. What have you learned about it so far?
Well, I've learned a lot. I grew up in New York City, and I've had a lot of friends who have been AME. We can say that for short. And so my friends have been AME. My grandmother was actually an AME before she converted to Catholicism. But I didn't know that Mother Bethel's history was here in Philadelphia. And I didn't know that these AME churches were formed here, and that Mother Bethel is named Mother Bethel because it is the mother of all of AME churches. So, and then the history about how it came into being here in Old City, the heart of the African American community, the heart of what's the Seventh Ward. It's just been a kind of a phenomenal.
Well, let's walk through the history together. It starts kind of around the late 1700s. Philadelphia considers itself a progressive city, but racial equality really hasn't reached that.
Well, yeah, I mean, there was really no such thing as racial equality, right? So America was young. 1776 is when Independence Day was founded. The Pilgrims came over in the 1600s. So, the U.S. Constitution wasn't ratified fully until 1790s, but by 1787 or so, all of this, the colonies then had decided sort of what they wanted. And Pennsylvania is very interesting because there were Mennonites, there were Quakers, and they believed in emancipation. So it was one of the first colonies to actually say that slavery was against the law. It was against humanity. So you had free people here. You had formerly enslaved people who escaped and came here. And so you had an interesting community of Black people who were here and were sort of assimilating into society, with Native Americans and all the other people who were making America what America was. So, but once the Constitution was signed, and in order to keep the Southern planters happy, you had to have there was segregation or racial separation happened. And that's when that sort of pushed this idea that Absalom Jones and Richard Allen could no longer sit in that pew. Because actually the truth of the matter was Richard Allen was preaching a 5 a.m. service at St. George's Methodist Church. So he was teaching a 5 a.m. sermon. He had Black people coming to his sermon, and because he had been converted by his enslaver. So he was converted by his enslaver. He got the call to preach. He went out into the world. He came back to Philadelphia. He went to the Mid-Atlantic. America wasn't but so big. He went to the Mid-Atlantic, started proselytizing, converting people, came home, still wanted to be Methodist, had this church, had this class that he was teaching, or his service, and then he and Absalom Jones, who was his homeboy, who was his friend, there was this, there was undercurrents. There's a movement that they were going to separate. So then he decided to worship one Sunday, and he was told to leave, because now in order to keep the Southern planters happy, you had to sort of make Black lives less than white ones.
So Richard Allen was a part of St. George's Church, but he also was preaching. Was his congregation all Black at that time?
I think so. I'm not sure, but most, and it was 5 a.m. in the morning. Like they gave him the most like
the worst time slot. We would say today.
Yeah, inconvenience time. We didn't have photographs. We weren't 100% sure.
Yeah.
And I'm sure some early planners probably wandered in at 5 a.m. too. I mean, he was proselytizing and helping and changing over lives of people all over, because church services weren't necessarily segregated then. But the irony is that church services became the first pieces, evangelical churches became the first places in America where there was segregation.
And I mean, the segregation, it's so terrible that, Black people were put upstairs out of sight at some point.
Yeah, but what Richard Allen and Absalom Jones did was walk out. So they left. They were like, you know what? We're not having this. We're leaving. So they left and started their own churches. And they started their own churches with just Black people, because they didn't think that they should have to deal with the indignities of going to church and worshiping in a place that didn't recognize them as fully human.
And where did they take their congregation? Where did they move to?
Well, they had to build new churches. Actually, from how I understand it, Absalom Jones built his church first, and it became St. Thomas Anglican Episcopal Church. And that church was at 5th between Walnut and Chestnut.
Okay.
And that church is still around now, and it's in West Philly. It moved to West Philly. So he built his church, and that's and it was Anglican church. So high Anglican, Episcopalian, that church. And then Richard Allen wanted to stay Methodist. And then he bought the land at 6th and Lombard. And he also bought a former blacksmith house, and he put the blacksmith house on 6th and Lombard and refurbished it. And he opened Mother Bethel, and I think it was in September of 1794, and it's been going strong ever since.
Wow. Black-led, Black-funded, and self-governed.
Yes. Now, there was, from what I understand, because anytime an organization starts something new within an organization, the main organization kind of still wants to take over. So I know there were some lawsuits, and there were some attempts to say that the land that was owned by Richard Allen was a part of the larger Methodist group, even though they didn't even want these people.
This church that didn't want them whatsoever.
In the first place. Right.
Oh
so there was some back and forth. But by 1816, this had happened because of the tenor of the country, because of what was happening. This had happened in Baltimore, in Maryland, New Jersey, New York, anywhere where there had been a Methodist people congregating and worshiping. The churches were now segregated, so people started their own church. So what Richard Allen did in 1816 was started a conference of all of the black church leaders, and that's how they united and became one denomination. So this is 30 years after Mother Bethel started, and so now you have an entire denomination of African Methodist Episcopal
39 countries, 5 continents, and they're all gathering together thanks to this one man.
Yeah, that's today.
Yes.
And then we get more countries and et cetera, et cetera. And so, yeah,
of course.
all because of him.
Yeah, and the church still stands today. Mm-hmm. Have you visited it recently?
I was just at Mother Bethel before I came here.
Oh, yes.
Yes, it's here. Yeah, it's open. It's gorgeous because, the blacksmith shop was replaced by another church in 1805. Then that was replaced by another church, I think in 1841. And the actual church that's there, 1890, has been there ever since. It's the same building.
How do they celebrate their history within the walls?
I mean, they just worship every Sunday.
Yeah.
I grew up Roman Catholic, and there's a Black Catholic church here called St. Peter Claver. There's St. Thomas Episcopal, there's Baptist churches, there's Beulah Baptist churches. There's always a spirit of community and hope and connection in most Black Christian denominated churches. And even in the Black Catholic Church tradition, a lot of the gospel of the Methodist Church it comes over. Every Sunday, there is a recognition. There are moments of praise. There's moments of history. There's moments of celebration.
Elizabeth, it is such a joy to talk with you because you really do live, breathe Philadelphia culture. You've been working for the Inquirer for just a few years now.
Yeah, don't tell anybody. I started when I was 2.
Making it part of your life. Do you see any parallels between this moment and other cultural, institutional breakaways within Philadelphia?
I mean, I think it's hard to frame these as breakaways because they didn't want to leave. You know, African Americans were part of the society and the culture, and they didn't decide, oh, let me go start my own thing because I want to. You know, we had to start our own things. We weren't invited to play in the beginning. So the thing about Mother Bethel, it is the beginning institution, if not one of the first institution that is for Black people, by Black people, made for Black people, that Black people can go to. So from Mother Bethel, you have the Institute of Colored Youth, which is in that block. You have schools. You know, all these institutions didn't break away from a community. They were started because people were not allowed to join the community in the first place.
Beautiful insight on just, the truth of what this story really is. How do you think the moment reflects patterns, we see today, though, in workplaces, wellness, spaces, cultural institutions?
Historically Black colleges, historically Black hospitals. There was a Frederick Douglass teaching institution that was opened in the 7th Ward because majority institutions didn't allow doctors to come there and learn to practice medicine, right? So you have these institutions, but because people don't know history and they don't know the understanding of it, people are now telling African Americans that our organizations don't allow them in when they were actually started because we weren't not allowed in. So no one ever says, and I've been Black a long time, in every African American, or whether it's a school, if you look at historically Black colleges, there are white people in those schools. If you look at historically Black fraternities and sororities, there are white people who are members. If you look at hip hop, if you look at any institution that has been started by African Americans and for African Americans never have said other people cannot come into our space. We've never said that. But because of the way that the world is looking now, they're saying, well, our organizations are racist. And they're not. They are not. And no one will say you cannot come. But the difference is that a lot of majority institutions historically said you cannot come. And they want to say you cannot come. So that's the problem that we're having here. So now you have hundreds of years of history. You have schools like Howard University. You have the Smithsonian Museum where you have Black history, which was not taught in other places in these places. And they're trying to say that those things are racist, not understanding or not wanting to understand or just not caring that the institutions were started because Black people could not go into other places. And sometimes we'd have our own places and people would just burn it down because they just don't think that we should have things. So if you don't understand the past, you repeat it. But you can't blame people for something that they did not do because you feel a certain kind of way. And if you want to join, show up. Come to the Smithsonian. Go to Mother Bethel. Trust you, they'll let you in.
Yeah. You're welcome.
They will let you in. You are welcome.
You are welcome. Well, okay, so we talk about all the time about being resilient and fighting from the inside to get what you believe in. But this was one of the successful times where walking away was the better choice.
It's always, in Black history, it's always been the better choice. And the beautiful thing about Black churches is that when they started, from Black churches came the civil rights movement. From Black churches came the schools movements. From Black churches came voting. It's not about walking away. It's using your community to get what you need and get what you want. So he had no choice but to walk away. What else was he supposed to do? What they probably wouldn't have given him communion at some point. He had to leave if he wanted to worship. And if you're in church, you should not be in a space where you are not treated equally. And you should not be waiting for people to allow you the humanity that you are born into.
I am so appreciative of all of the knowledge that you bring to this and all of the history and all of the research that you have done in person, firsthand, walking into the church yourself.
The beautiful thing about Mother Bethel is that Mother Bethel sits at the center of so much history. Like that 7th Ward area, to me, if you didn't have Mother Bethel, you wouldn't have the Institute for Colored Youth, which is the university that was across the street. And then you wouldn't have Cheney, which came from that school. If you walk within a 2-mile radius of that school, you have that's where W.E.B. Du Bois did the study for the Philadelphia Negro, which was he studied that entire neighborhood, which came out of Mother Bethel. If you had people like Frances Ellen Watkins was one of the first Black women to have, other than Phyllis Wheatley. Later, she had poetry and things published, which was right there at 9th and Lombard. You have, there's so much. Octavius Catto, who was one of the teachers at the Institute for Colored Youth, who was killed. There's a statue for him in downtown, but he was actually killed right across the street from the fire department. All of these societies here in Philly. And then later you have, like, the Links are here, which is African American women's fraternity, sorority society, where you had all of these doctors, and there was a Doctors Row. You have the 7th Ward, and then down at South Street on the other side, you have Doctors Row. You have the Pyramid Club, where you have the women from there started the not the Links, Jack and Jill, which is like the mothers group. There's so many firsts here in Philly that African Americans were able to start because of the unique space they were in. William Still helped build the Underground Railroad. Harriet Tubman, stayed in Old City for a long time, before she escaped. So that Mother Bethel is the center of all of that. And from there, you have Booker T. Washington coming. You have Dr. King, I think, came. So many people have come and stopped through Mother Bethel as African Americans were fighting for freedom and equality here.
Wow, the African Methodist Episcopal Church and Mother Bethel really just set the blueprint for this society, this world that we live in today. We're just a small part of it.
And there were reactions to the blueprint too. The blueprint was, it made it so we had a place to go when we had no place to go. It was a seat of power and a seat of community in a world that really wasn't trying to do much, and helped us make sure that Black people were educated. You don't have to be African Methodist Episcopal to reap the benefits of what happened at Richard Allen's church.
Elizabeth, I could sit here and pick your brain for hours, but we are lucky enough to read your works all year long. You've been covering the 52 weeks of first for the Philadelphia Inquirer, and you will continue to do it throughout the 250th celebrations, right?
Yeah, and I've had fun. This is the first one I think had to do with African American history, but I can't wait to find out about the pencil. I'm obsessed. I want to learn about the pencil. I want to learn about the slinky. I want to learn about soda, ice cream soda. I want some ice cream sodas. I just think it's a very fun thing. I learned about the volunteer fire department. Who knew that if your house burned down, nobody was going to come put out the fire, right? Unless you were. But Philadelphia made it so that you didn't have to be a part of. We always knew firemen were hunky, but we didn't. Philadelphia made it so that you didn't have to be a part of that organization. That's really so. There's so many amazing firsts here.
How about the Girl Scouts knocking on the window of the Philadelphia Gas and Electric Company and saying, "Hey, let us bake cookies in your window. It'll help you. It'll help us."
I like the people who walked by and was like, "Yo,
I want cookies.
Those cookies smell good. Can I buy some?" That's so innovative in the 1930s.
52 weeks doesn't feel like enough weeks to celebrate all the firsts that came out of Philadelphia. Maybe we'll extend this.
We should. 250,
251, 252.
You should do next year the first that didn't make the first list.
I love it. We love a list in Philadelphia. Well, thank you for joining us today. Thank you for continuing to highlight the special 52 that did make the list. And we'll look for those extra ones as well. Please join us later in the series. You are such a wonderful person to have on the set with us.
Oh, thank you. It's fun.
Well, we have lots of reading to catch up on if we haven't read them already. I've read them all. You should too. And we'll have lots more to see in the Philadelphia Inquirer.
Thanks. Oh, and they run on Saturdays. Every Saturday, you can see them on page A2, but they publish live on Thursdays. And I'm going to start posting on Instagram, so I'll let you know about that too.
We'll be looking out for them.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us on this week's journey through Philadelphia Firsts. Follow us on social media using @52FirstPhilly. And if you enjoyed this episode, share it with somebody who you know loves a good origin story. We'll see you next week.